Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to another video on Lightning Web Component Development series on Apex Hours. In this video, we'll talk about wire adapters and functions. In this video, I'll show you how wire adapter works, what is the syntax of a wire adapter, and how you can bind something using wire property, and when you can use the wire adapter using a function as well, right? So let's start this demo now. Let me start the slideshow. Let's start with the introduction. I'm Kapil Batra. I'm a Salesforce MVP and founder of blog salesforcebold.com and the YouTube channel also Salesforce Bold. I'm from Ajmer, Rajasthan, and I'm currently working as a senior Salesforce consultant. The agenda of this video will be to understand the wire service, understand the syntax of it, import reference to object and fields using wire services. I'll show you how you can use wire with property and wire with function as well. And of course, there are going to be some examples which will help you to understand it better. All right, let's move to next slide now. So first, let me ask you, do you understand what exactly a wire service is? Let me tell you, the wire service provisions an immutable stream of data to the component. Each value in the stream is a newer version of the previous value set. We call the wire service reactive in part because it supports reactive variables which are prefixed with $sign. You will notice whenever we will be calling wire service, we will be using parameter with $sign there because those are reactive parameters. If a reactive variable change, the wire service provisions new data. Now here, you might be hearing few terms first time like immutable stream and reactive parameter. So let me just give you a short description of it. So what is immutable data? So immutable data is a piece of information in a database that cannot be or should not be deleted or modified. Most traditional databases store data in a mutable format, meaning the database overwrites the older data when new data is available. For example, in an employee database, the address information is overwritten when an employee changes their address, right? This is mutable thing. The database that store immutable data will not overwrite an old item when new information is available. They will use various techniques to preserve the historical and current value of the data. So that's why we will be using immutable data here. And if we talk about reactive variables, so reactive variables can trigger reactive changes in your application. Whenever you modify the value of a reactive variable, queries that depends on that variable refresh and your application UI updates accordingly. So whenever you will be using some parameters, some parameters in your wire services, so those parameters are reactive parameters. So let's suppose if we will change the value of that reactive parameter, so the data returned using that reactive parameter is going to be changed as well. Okay. So to import a wire adapter using named import syntax, you have to decorate a property or function with @wire and specify the wire adapter. Each wire adapter defines a data type. The wire service provisions an immutable stream of data. The data is not guaranteed to be the same even when the adapter config object content is same. So whenever we are using wire service, the data will be coming from the cacheable format. So the data will be stored in the cached memory. And as we will be using reactive variables, so whenever you will change the reactive variables value, so the data retrieved using that reactive variable will also be refreshed, right? So whenever we will be using cache data plus reactive variable, the result will be good local state management. Let's move to syntax now. So this is a basic syntax of a wire service. So here if you will notice, first you have to add your wire keyword here while importing it. So first you have to import wire from LWC if you want to use it in your Lightning Web component. Okay. Then you can import the adapter of wire service. So here on the line number 2, we are importing get records. So This is the identifier of the wire adapter. This is an identifier from UI record APIs, right? And this lightning slash UI record API, this is an identifier that contains wire adapter function. So basically this cat records is coming from the UI record API. And here, as you can see on the class itself, we are calling that same identifier again, get records. And here, if you will notice the dollar sign with the variable name, that means this is a reactive variable. Okay, and here we are just passing the field imported here, like here we have imported account name, and here we are passing the field. So basically, a field which we are passing here, it is a configuration object specific to the wire adapter. Configuration object property value can be either a string or reference to objects. Right now it is a reference to object, it is not a string, right? And fields imported from Salesforce schema. Like we have imported this field using Salesforce schema and we have used the reference of it here. And this record, it is going to be the result. So this is a private property or function that receives the stream of data from the wire service. Okay, we will see it in detail in further examples. Now let me show you how you can import reference using your wire services. So using wire adapters, you can import reference to Salesforce objects and field as well. Salesforce verifies that the object and field exist, prevents object and fields from being deleted, and cascades any renamed object and field into your component source code. It also ensures that dependent object and fields are included in chain sets and packages. Importing reference to object and fields ensure that your code works even when objects and field name change. So this was the benefit of using this import service, using importing object names and fields. So this is an example of importing a reference to an object. To import a reference of an object, you can simply use the import keyword here. You can have import, then the object name. So for here, for the naming convention, for object we use object name in capital letters underscore object, and for field we'll be using field name in capital letters underscore field. So here, as you can see, this is for object. There are two objects we are importing, position and account. Position is a custom object and account is the standard one. So to import them, the location of both objects are same. We will be importing it from Salesforce schema. So you have to add @Salesforce slash schema slash you have to add your object API name. So for account it is account, and for position it is position underscore underscore C, as it is a custom object. Now this is an example of importing a reference to a specific field. So let's suppose if you would like to add some fields here from position and account object as well. So this is the way of adding it. As I told you, for a better naming convention, we'll be using field name underscore field, and for object we'll be using object name underscore object. So here, as you can see, the field name was position label. So that's why we are using position underscore level underscore field from. We will be importing it using Salesforce schema as well, but to refer a field, you have to use your object name before that. So as we are referring a field from position, so that's why we have used position dot label double underscore C. Same goes for standard field as well. Like from account, we are importing name, so that's why we have added naming convention as account underscore name underscore field from Salesforce schema, and to access the field we have used object dot field API name. And the same way, if you would like to import reference to a relationship field, right? So let's suppose if you would like to retrieve owner name of account, or maybe if you would like to retrieve any related field, so like we can retrieve it in a DML query or in query builder. The same way we can use that format here. So to retrieve the relationship field, you can simply add object name dot field name field API name double underscore R dot related field name. And here, if you will notice, for the standard side, we have used object name dot owner and then dot name. So that's how you can also reference to the relationship fields as well. Now here's a basic tip which you can use while importing these references. I have already told you about it. For objects, we use the naming convention object name underscore object, and for field, we use the naming convention field name underscore field. Now you might be thinking like why we should use this specific naming convention. I mean, we can use anything like as per our requirement or whatever feels right. No, it is not like that. So naming convention, so basically we create these kind of rule set to make code easier to understand. Okay, so basically they are guidelines, not rules. So it is just to make your code easy to understand. Let's suppose if some other developer is also working on the same code, so using the same naming convention, he will be able to understand your code, and the same way you will be able to understand other developers code as well. So that's why basically we use a specific naming convention for these references. Okay, now let me show you how you can wire with property. So this is an example of wiring something with property. Wiring a property is useful when you want to consume the data as it is. Okay, let's suppose if you like to consume data as it is and you don't want to make any changes like after consuming the data. If the property decorated with wire is used as an attribute in the template and its value changes, the wire service provisions the data and trigger the component to re-render. The property is private, but still it is reactive. Now let me show you by creating a new component on my VS Code. Okay, so let's move to VS Code now. Just a second, here it is. Okay, so let's create a new component first. So to create a new component, you can just open the list using Command Shift P or Control Shift P. Now here you can type create lightning web component. Let's name it wire with property. Okay, now let's create it. So here, to use the wire service, first we have to import the wire here. We have to add wire here. Okay, now let's suppose for this example, we will be using the get record UI record API, and we will be getting few fields from account object. Okay, so let me first import the get record API. The syntax is pretty similar. You just have to use import, then name of the identifier, get record from lightning UI record API. Okay, now let's import fields as well. So let's suppose for this example, I'm just adding account name field. Okay, and we will be importing it from Salesforce schema. So for that, we will use @Salesforce / schema. Just a second. / account dot name. So if you'll notice, to access the name, we have to use the object name, then dot the field API name. Okay. Now we will be getting the account name of the current record, current account basically. So for that, we will need record ID of that page. Okay. Now this is the bonus point in this video. To get the record ID, you can simply use a API here. And if you will just do record ID, so this record ID will be having the ID from the page itself. Okay, and as we are using API, so we have to add API here as well. Okay, now it is fine. Now let's use wire with properties. So for that, we will add wire, then we will add identifier name, which is get record. Okay, Then here in get record UI record API, you need to pass record ID and fields that needs to be retrieved. So for here, I'm passing record ID colon, and as this is a reactive parameter, so we'll be using it using dollar sign record ID, okay, comma fields, and here you can pass either reference of that field or maybe a string. So in our case, we'll be passing this reference. Okay, let me quickly copy it from here and paste it here. Okay, and then we will be storing the data here in this record. So this is the basic syntax of using wire with property. I believe we are having an error here. Okay, we missed to add from keyword here. Okay, import identifier name from Salesforce schema. So this is the basic syntax. Okay, now this record will be receiving data using the record ID. All right, guys. So now we are having our data in this record. Okay, now let's have this data in the UI as well. So for UI, we'll be just having a basic UI. I will be just having a simple paragraph tag with bold. Okay, but first we have to get the data, get the value from this data. Okay, so right now this data is not an actual value, so we have to get the actual value from this data. So for that we'll be using get field value UI record API to get the field value from this field. Okay, so for that let's create a getter property. Maybe we can create name. Okay, and here in this name we can do return get field value this dot account dot data, and then we can pass the reference of that field, which is account name field. Now from this data, it will give us the value of this specific field. Now let's try to have this on the UI as well. So here I will just add a paragraph tag. I will also make it bold, and here we will do account name. Right. Now we won't be having this on our Salesforce Bolt application like we did for previous example, because this Lightning Web component is expecting a record ID, which we won't be able to have it on this custom application. So for that, we will be having it on a single account. Okay, so for testing purpose, I will be using this account, and let's add that component here. Okay, let's add it on the right side. So wire with property, here it is. This is the component, and unfortunately we are having an error here which says cannot read property of undefined reading data. Okay, we'll check it out now. Okay, this is having an error. Let's see in JavaScript. Okay, we did a mistake here. So our record name was record. Instead of that, I put account here. Okay, I think this should be fine now. Let me deploy it again and reload the page. Okay, this should be fine now. Okay, now here, if you'll notice, this is our Lightning Web component, and you can see the value of the name field here. You can see the name here. In the same way, like if you will open another account record page, there the value will be different based on the reactive parameter, which we are getting using this URL ID, using the API record ID, right? So that's how you can wire with property basically. Now let's suppose if you would like to make some changes after receiving the data, so in that case you can use wire with function. Okay, now let me show you how you can wire with function as well. Okay, Wiring a function is useful to perform logic whenever new data is provided or when an error occurs. The wire service provisions the function an object with error and data properties just like the wire property one. But here you can perform some action maybe after receiving data or maybe after receiving the error in that. Okay, now let's try the same using the same component again. So let's move to our component. Here it is. Now this was for wire with property. Now we'll be creating another component. Let's name it create lightning web component wire with function. Okay, all right. So now first we will import API and wire here because we'll be using it in this example. And let's import the same get record again. Okay, this is the same get record. We are using it again here. And we will be having record ID from page. Okay. Now we will call the wire function. So the syntax is a little bit different, guys, while calling wire as property and wire as function. So to call wire as function, the first line will be same. You can just simply put your identifier name, then record ID, then we will have record ID. Okay. Then you have to pass fields. As I told you, for field you can either pass a reference of a field or you can pass the string. So this time let's pass the string account name. Okay, now we will be wiring this property and we will be having error or data from it. Okay, so for that we will add another attribute here. Let's add wired account. Okay, and this will be having error or data in it. Awesome. Now if it returns data, so if it returns data, you can perform your logic here. Okay, so let's suppose like for this demo I'm just adding a console log. Maybe let's add it, getting data from wire with function. Okay, and you can store the data in other attributes. So let me create another attribute here. Let's name it accounts, and here we can do this dot accounts is equal to data, and we'll be having another attribute for error. Okay, so this was for if data. Now if else if error. So in the case of error, this dot error should be error. Okay, and also we will be having a console log in case of error. And let's try to get the message by error dot body dot message. All right, so this looks fine now. Now let me add it to that page and show you the output, but before that we have to add targets and make it exposed. To add the component in any page, any record page, app page, first you have to make it exposed true, and then you can add different targets. Like for this component I have added this should be available for lightning app page, lightning record page, and lightning home page as well. Okay, let me deploy it quickly now. All right, this seems fine to me. Now let's go back to this component and do edit page. Okay, let's search for our component now, wire width function. Here it is. So let's add it here. It won't be having any output, but we will be able to see a log of it. Okay, it is saved. Let's go back and do inspect element and go to console log. So here you can see our log, which is getting data from wire with function. Okay, so that means our method is getting called, and this was the action I was performing if it returns the data. So you can consider it like whenever you need to perform some action based on the returned data, you can use wire with function. And if you would like to use the data as it is or error, in that case you can use wire with property. All right. So we have covered most of it, wire with property and wire with function. And I believe this must be the last slide. Yes. So that it is for today, guys. If you have any query related to binding wire property or functions, wire adapters, Apex schema, so you can just leave a comment below. I will try to revert back as soon as possible. If you like today's video, a subscribe to the channel will be awesome, guys. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.